wanted to address a couple of things. I reviewed the emergency motion for temporary relief, Mr. Smith, and it does appear as though a lot of the allegations alleged within that motion are really in the nature of contempt. I know that there is a contempt proceeding, a contempt hearing being held on December the 17th, I believe, before Magistrate Valentine. The court's purpose in the hearing today is only to address the issues as it relates to an emergency. So as I'm looking at the motion, the paragraph specifically that the court will address would be related to paragraph 7. The 16-year-old child is now a suspect in the death of the stepchild during the cruise. While released from custody, the 16-year-old child is residing with a third party. Paragraph 17, the 16-year-old's future has been put in jeopardy because of the choices made by the respondent. And paragraph 19, and most importantly, the youngest child is at immediate risk of abuse, abandonment, or neglect in the care of the respondent. So those are the issues that the court is going to address here this morning, is whether or not, in fact, the court needs to take some sort of emergency action based on those allegations contained within the motion. As it relates to the other provisions in there with regard to alienation and violating court orders, et cetera, I'm going to allow those. That was properly referred to the general magistrate, and that hearing has been set for December the 17th.
Yeah, and I understand the court's ruling. Obviously, we think part of the alienation of the children is part and parcel of the immediate risk to the children, because the father is limited in his contact with the children.
Well, and it's okay to address those issues because that goes to the risk to the children. But if the goal is for the court to hold mom in contempt because she's not allowing the children to speak to dad or something along those lines, that's really more of a contempt issue. So I'm really specifically interested in the risk of abuse, abandonment, and neglect of the youngest child, and also to hear the status of the middle child. I understand that there was a stipulation and that the child was residing with a relative, a third party. That, of course, will be important to the court to determine whether or not the youngest child will have any contact with that child and whether that could create an imminent risk to the child.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any questions then with regard to the court's ruling on that?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Athanasson, any questions from you?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Smith, you may begin with opening.
Your Honor, in this case, obviously, it's our position that the youngest child is at risk for a number of reasons. As the court is aware through the pleadings, there's a young lady who's passed away. That matter is still under investigation. That was not my client's child, but the stepchild of the mother in this case, and the remaining 16-year-old is now a suspect in that case. In this case, the mother took the children both on a cruise against my client's wishes, while preventing him from having regular contact with those children. We believe that the arrangements that were made by the mother, as far as the sleeping arrangements, were insufficient, that the 18-year-old, the 16-year-old, and another 14-year-old were all placed in the same stateroom. There's indications that they may have, because they were in international waters, may have been engaging in activities that they normally couldn't engage in while they were in the United States properly being supervised. In addition, we will present evidence that through the older child, who's now 18, so he's an adult, but he is the son of the parties, as to violence, alcohol use in the past, and he's been living with his father for approximately almost 2 years now, since these parties had their separation, where, as the court is aware, there was an original divorce case, there was parenting time, both parties were in Hernando County, then the mother relocated by agreement between the parties over to Titusville. since she relocated to Titusville, that's when the problems have occurred, where the father has been very limited in his access to the children. I'd reserve with regard to any other comments until closing.
Well, let me ask you this question, Mr. Smith. If the oldest child has been residing with the respondent for 2 years, and this, I mean, we're dealing, I understand, I saw that there's a supplemental petition for modification that's also pending, so that would be an ultimate issue for trial. How would this, is it your intention to have the oldest child testify?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what if has the oldest child had any contact with the 2 other children or the respondent since he's been living with the petitioner for the last 2 years?
Well, one of the main things is the circumstances where he wound up living with my client. There was a physical altercation.
That would have been 2 years ago, correct?
A year and a half, yes, Your Honor. And he was also allowed to drink alcohol, which again, I think goes to the relevancy of whether these children were, whether the mother in this case encouraged the underage alcohol, especially on the cruise ship. And the violence that, I mean, this, again, the allegations are this 18-year-old has passed away in a violent manner. The 18-year-old will testify is that there was violence between himself, his mother, and the stepfather. And he has had recent contact with I think that goes to the whether there's any risk returning to the father. The child was allowed finally to come over for a Thanksgiving visit.
The child, okay.
She was restricted from contact with the one that there are allegations against, but did have contact with her adult brother, and exhibited no fear, no reservations. Both my client as well as the 18-year-old can testify about that.
Well, remember though, this isn't we're here on an emergency motion. So this isn't an issue as to where it is in the best interest of the minor children to reside. I mean, that is ultimately an issue for trial in the modification action. The only issue that we're here to address today is whether or not is in imminent danger remaining in the petitioner's care as a result of recent incidents. So that's really primarily the court's concern today.
Well, and Your Honor, I understand that position, and certainly whether or not the child's to be removed from the mother is whether or not there's an imminent risk to the child. I think the court also has to look at where the child would be placed and the circumstances there as to whether there's any harm to relocating the child. I think you have to, in terms of emergency relief and an injunction, essentially, you have to look at.
No, I think you're looking at 2 different things. This isn't an injunctive relief. I mean, you're not here seeking injunctive relief. I mean, that would have been in the injunction court, correct?
Well, we're seeking to have the child removed from the mother and placed with the father. So I think that the court needs to look at whether or not there would be any harm to that. Obviously, our position is there wouldn't be, that she'd be able to transition to the father fine.
Okay, I'm not sure I agree with your argument, Mr. Smith, but I understand what your argument is. Okay. Ms. Anderson, opening?
Yes. Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. We believe, and I think we filed that in our response, that there's no emergency that exists. There was an incident on the cruise ship. The Federal Bureau of Investigations is investigating that. There have been no arrests made yet, but since my clients were advised that was a suspect in that, after he was released from the hospital upon the return to the United States, he was placed with a relative of the mother's. And not only did that happen, but mom contacted dad, and dad signed an agreement to say that this child would be placed with a third party, thereby removing any risk of any danger to any of the other children in the home. So that has been resolved, and there's been nothing mentioned of that. Nobody's saying, I don't hear the other side saying that they participated in that in any way, whereas the father was advised and did participate. The minor child You're going to hear testimony that she's fine, that there is no risk to her. There were abuse reports made. We have a person here from the Department of Children and Families that can attest that there's no concerns about the child remaining in the care of Shauntel and Chris Kepner.
All right, thank you.